All right, is this thing on? I'm live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of LunarCrush Live. We are doing it again. Thanks for joining me. Today, I've got Carter Feldman from QED Protocol. We're going to be talking ZK. We're going to be learning a little bit about Carter and everything going on in his world and launching a new protocol. A lot of work, a lot of effort. He's got a cool background, so we'll dig into that as well. Let's just dive into it. Let's make this thing happen. All right, everyone, let's do it. Carter, welcome to the show. How's it going, my man?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Glad you're here. It's evening here in the U.S. I always like to ask, where are you in the world, and what's it like there right now?
So I'm in Hong Kong. So it's 9 a.m. in the morning. Nice and, well, not too sunny, but, as sunny as it gets nowadays.
Love that. Yeah, it's always fun in the industry. It's just, you never know where anyone is. And then even if you think you know, they're always in a different spot. So a lot of travel, but a lot of fun. As remote as it is, we always kind of treat the conferences as like the get-togethers, and that's where a lot of the BD gets done. So it's good to have you on, my man. So heard a lot about you. I was even at the Bitcoin Renaissance, at ETH Denver, even those Bitcoin Renaissance, saw you on stage, very impressed. You got a lot going on. Seems like you're very passionate. Where do you find your passion from? Like, why are you in this space?
Yeah. I guess I've always been sort of, one of the more traditional kind of crypto people who are passionate about the space because they want to see the web decentralized. And I think especially as people are spending more and more time on their computers rather than in sort of the physical world, we've got accustomed to living in these digital dictatorships that are controlled by the larger platforms. And I think that trend is just accelerating. I already spend probably like 9 to 10 hours a day on my computer. I think a lot of other people are spending most of their waking hours on their machines as well. So right now, like, humanity's kind of at this like crossroads. Like, if we go left, then we're just going to spend our lives where all of our assets, all of our, social capital is controlled by large platforms like your Metas and Axes of the world. Or we can sort of, veer the other direction and go for a fully decentralized world. And I'm very passionate about that. But sort of, I guess, coming into what we do at QED specifically is previously it wasn't really practical to build these kinds of scalable applications that normal people like to use on blockchain just because of the way that blockchain works. We're using zero-knowledge proofs to make these kinds of applications that want to handle millions of users at a time possible for, again, the first time.
Maybe talk just a little bit about like zero-knowledge proof and what it is, why it's important. Like, how did that kind of innovation come along?
Yeah, for sure. So just for a little bit of context, like the way that essentially a blockchain works is that everyone computes every single transaction. So every time you send an Ethereum transaction that calls a smart contract, every single Ethereum full node runs and processes that transaction. So of course, the problem here is that the way we scale on the internet is by splitting up work, right? So if I have 1 million people using Facebook at the same time, Facebook has a ton of different servers, and each server is going to handle some of those requests from some of the users, and they split up the work amongst those servers, and that's called load balancing. But with the Web3 model that we've had thus far, everyone needs to compute every single transaction, right? That's how we come to consensus. You run these 10 transactions, I run these 10 transactions, everyone runs them. And then once we're done running them, we compare the results with each other, right? And if everyone gets the same result, then we've established consensus. However, we can't split up the work because, as we add more nodes to the network, well, sure, it makes the network more secure because more people are computing every transaction. But it's not like I want to have, let's say, these 10 nodes compute these transactions, these 10 nodes compute those transactions, right? So we can't really split up the work with current blockchains. But zero knowledge proofs are this really cool thing where I can take any program, let's say a program that, I don't know, validates 1 million transactions, right? So it's going to be checking all those signatures, making sure no one's double spending, making sure everyone's balances are adjusted accordingly. And it's going to output what's called a Merkle root, or you can think of it just as like a fingerprint, which is the hash of everyone's balance. You can think of it like that. So if anyone's balance changes, that hash is going to change. And from that hash, I can see what anyone else's balance is, right? So I'm going to write a program which computes all 1 million of those transactions and outputs the start and end state roots. So we started with, an Excel spreadsheet that keeps track of everyone's balances. You had $10, I had $5. I then sent you my $5, and now you have $15, right? So we output this fingerprint. And with a zero knowledge proof, what you can do is take that big computation and generate a proof that from some start root, like let's say the first fingerprint, to the fingerprint after we've done those 1 million transactions, those state roots should be, some value and another value. And the really cool thing is that while it takes a long time to process those 1 million transactions, anyone can verify that proof of 1 million transactions in about a millisecond. So now we can split up the work. Essentially, your node's going to process 100 transactions. My node's going to process another 100 transactions. We can split it all up. And in addition to validating those transactions, we just have to generate proofs. And then once we're done generating the proof, instead of having to recompute your transactions, I can just verify your proof in 1 millisecond. And what QED is doing, which is really cool, is I can generate a proof of proofs. So we can take my proof and your proof and sort of connect them together and make a proof from those two proofs. And we can do this and build kind of like a tree of proofs where the end result is that anyone who wants to verify the entire blockchain from Genesis just has to verify a single zero knowledge proof. So like what ZKPs are for blockchain is essentially, it's a new way to establish consensus that allows us to split up the work of processing transactions without losing any of our security assumptions, right? So the blockchain not only gets more secure, but it also gets more scalable. So like what attracts me and what makes me passionate about this is I'm, again, always a big fan of decentralization. But also we saw this opportunity to have like a generational change, like a blockchain 2.0. And, these kinds of words get thrown around a lot, but we call it a sort of 2.0 like change because we get extra scalability without having to make a compromise, right? So it's like a full upgrade. Everything just gets better. Nothing gets worse. That's what we're doing at QED. Like we're trying to extend the security of these platforms to, scale to millions of transactions per second. We support Ethereum, Bitcoin, and also soon Dogecoin. We've been doing some really cool stuff with the Dogecoin developers. Also, shout out to the Dogecoin miners for also being super supportive in this. But we're just here to scale blockchain without making security compromises.
Yeah, I mean that last sentence right there is like the summation of everything that you had just talked about. I mean, I think a big thing here is the ability to like when I think about a zero knowledge proof, like at first it sounded really interesting. It was like just saying the word zero knowledge. Like I can prove to you some sort of information or some data with like you don't need to know the knowledge that I know. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's proving something out and like almost it's a trustless way of proving something out. And I think that's, once you have that little aha moment, you kind of start to understand, okay, we can kind of like horizontally scale like each node times whatever, like as far as we can compute, like what you're saying. And suddenly now we can have enterprise applications potentially on top of the blockchain. Right. Is that kind of the direction that you're thinking about going? That's like some sort of enterprise, like some sort of.
I wouldn't even say enterprise.
Other social media. Yeah,
we can do like one of the things we're working on though, just to sort of preface this, is one of the biggest use cases that we think there is to bring sort of Web 2 into Web 3 is just taking the order book DEX user experience and bring it fully on chain without like enormous fees or really slow trades, right? So we want to capture that whole UX that you would get on something like Binance or FTX, right? And allow users to have full self-custody, but at the same time have a convenience and the UX that they're used to. So I think I wouldn't say like we're trying to bring all of the non-Web3 stuff to Web2, but we want to bring the whole internet to Web3. And with ZKPs, there's the first opportunity to do it without sacrificing the basic values of blockchain, which is that we want this decentralized sort of bulletproof type ledger, because everything else before has just been a compromise. It's like, oh, we trade a little bit of our security away for a little bit of scalability, right? Which it doesn't really work, right? Because you end up just being like a bad AWS, like some of these more centralized but claim to be more scalable chains. So yeah, this is the biggest innovation since we saw blockchain. I'm not saying QED. I'm not that pompous, but I would say zero knowledge proofs definitely is like the biggest innovation since blockchain. And there's been hype, but I don't think people realize like how crazy it is and how it's going to fundamentally change the internet.
It's super hard to understand. I mean, I've been in the industry since like 2015, building like a business in the industry since 2018. We're like the leading social media intelligence company like in the industry. Yeah. And the first time you kind of hear it, like, well, what are they working on? Like, what's going on over there? Like, how is that actually going to work? Because, I had like Sandeep from Polygon on this show back in, 2020, right? And we had the same discussion, like, hey, gas fees are too high, right? It's too slow. And so that, we're going to build a layer 2, and that's now Matic and Polygon, and that's out there. And it's like, it's being used, and sure, like Starbucks has a little partnership and people are using it to trade their Matic token and some USDC on top of that, and then everyone's kind of going back to Ethereum, and it's just kind of seems like somewhat of a base chain. And then you have optimistic roll-ups, and like there's problems there with consensus and what's going on. So it just seems like I think people have a hard time just understanding like, oh, is this going to be a paradigm shift? And if so, how is it going to start to affect me as a consumer?
Yeah. So I think it's worth saying that I think the reason why there's a lot of this confusion is like, rather than trying to explain what the implications of zero knowledge proofs are and focusing our efforts on that, because of the sort of academic roots of where ZKP has come from, a lot of the sort of public facing PR and marketing has been focused around like how zero knowledge proofs work. Like, let's be perfectly honest. We're both using very modern computers. Neither of us knows how all of the different components work. Maybe we have a rough idea of like how a CPU works, but we don't know how the GPU works or like the finer details of how that. We don't have to, and we can still appreciate, how the computer has changed our lives, right? So I think it's probably been a bad PR kind of cohort. Academics that always talk to other academics tend to explain things in a sort of jargon that other academics understand. But yeah, like I guess my message with zero knowledge proofs, and you brought up optimistic rollups. I think that's a great example. Like optimistic rollups is essentially a trade-off between Web 1.0, which is super scalable, but the security is like a just trust me, bro kind of security model. Like when I send out a post to Twitter, right, or to X rather, I just have to trust that Twitter is going to publish it and that they're not going to delete it, right? I have absolutely no control and no way to verify that some action that I've taken has actually occurred, right? With Web 2, we have censorship resistance, all this good stuff. Optimistic rollups is kind of like trying to thread the needle and maybe move back to a little bit of that Web 1 security model, with the result of being able to scale up some of these other platforms, right? Now, this is not a generational shift, and it won't be. And the reason why we know that is because we have to make trade-offs, right? Any kind of change that results in something getting worse and something getting better isn't going to be a big paradigm shift, right? Because the people that value the thing that's becoming, less, in this case, security, aren't going to like it, right? So there's going to be infighting. Not all applications are going to be able to use it. Maybe it's useful for some weird use cases. But with ZKP, we get to have our cake and eat it too, right? We get proof of math rather than some weird economic model that protects all of our transactions, right? And with ZKP, all you need to know is that I can take any program, anything, any computation, maybe let's say we want to run a full Ethereum node you could run in a ZKP, and you can generate a proof that's only, 480 bytes that proves 1 million transactions executed successfully. And now, instead of every Ethereum node needing to verify and run every single transaction, which is what a lot of the environmentalists get mad at us for, we can just distribute that 480 byte proof, and everyone can verify the work in 1 millisecond, right? So people run Ethereum nodes all over the world. People spend millions of dollars on computation, if not tens of millions of dollars, that now can be reduced to something that you can run on your phone.
Seems pretty disruptive to the current Ethereum model.
Yeah, and that's why. That's a very good point. And I think Ethereum is being smart in that they're positioning themselves. And Vitalik, the reason why Vitalik is talking about this is because he realizes what's going to happen with ZKP. Frankly, I think he wants Ethereum to be the place where you verify your proofs. Because while you can't forge a ZKP, it's like this, the difficulty of generating a fake proof is of the same order of difficulty of, I know your Ethereum address, let me try to guess your Ethereum private key, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, you're going to need trillions of years in supercomputers, right? Not going to happen.
Or maybe some quantum, you never know if it happens in the next 10 years.
Well, so we have quantum secure zero-knowledge proof protocols that are provably quantum secure. Some of them use lattice-based encryption or lattice-based cryptography rather. ZKPs are actually significantly more difficult to break with quantum computers than something like elliptic curve signature. But anyhow, the main point is
we're not going down that rabbit hole.
We're not going to go there. But with these L1s, I think Ethereum feels threatened by ZKP because they realize what it is. So they just want to be the place where everyone verifies their ZKPs. Now, Ethereum made a trade-off where in order to try to scale Ethereum, they switched to proof of stake several years back. And I think this was the worst mistake that Ethereum has ever made. Right? We see this concentration of interests and centralization on Ethereum that kind of is a little unprecedented. Certain, liquidity pools having over 30% of the staked ETH. You can imagine if one of those pools contracts had a vulnerability, there would be immense pressure from the people that have their money in the contract to do a rollback, right? It would probably happen. We'd probably roll it back. Rollbacks are real bad just because it reverses all of the transactions.
Yeah, it's like a shot through the heart of everything that it's meant to be.
And let's say I bought a house with Ethereum for $1 million, right? And I sent you $1 million, you signed off the deed to the house to me, it was done. Then what happens? Ethereum rolls back. You lose your $1 million you got from the house, even though you have nothing to do with these Lido people or that contract. You never audit it. You don't care about it, right? You're not trying to stake and earn some money off of that. You just wanted to, process my payment for the house, but you lose your shirt. So it's real bad. So what we're actually focusing on is getting ZKPs verified on proof of work chains. It's much more difficult to attack a proof of work chain because essentially all of the participants that are trying to mine blocks are all adversaries, right? With these Ethereum staking pools, if that contract gets hacked, everyone has a common interest to want to do a rollback, right? But with these different miners, they're all competing against each other. They're not in the same boat, right? They're trying to, if someone else gets screwed over or their power goes out, it's great for the other miners, right? Because they have a better chance of mining the block. So I think this adversarial security model is much better and much more sound. And Bitcoin's the most secure blockchain in the world. And even though Bitcoin has this super antiquated VM, it's the worst, just genuinely the worst. You don't have a multiplication instruction. So it's very difficult to do something even like a multiplication. And yet we've written a zero knowledge proof verifier in Bitcoin script. So the cool thing there, of course, is that while Bitcoin has this super antiquated, VM, and it's not super conducive to writing smart contracts. I can tell you that. That's why you don't see real DEXs on Bitcoin today.
Right.
But if we can verify a ZKP, I can write a ZK VM that supports all of the things that I want, even an EVM, and just verify the zero knowledge proof on Bitcoin rather than needing to write applications in Bitcoin script or try to do weird covenants and stuff, right? So, if the future is a place where the non-ZK chains are just places that people verify zero knowledge proofs, sort of like what Vitalik has been proposing, then I have a question for you, Joe. I mean, would you rather have your transactions secured by Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Bitcoin.
Yeah, right. It's a no-brainer.
100%. Yeah.
So
it's our truth machine. It's like it's the truth machine, and it's like you said, like a 51% attack at this point on Bitcoin. It's like it's not even like you need I think I did the math a couple years ago. It's like a couple trillion. It was like $1 trillion, and like the higher propensity is like some government maims it in some way, right? It's like regulation, but yeah, is that where you're getting where it's building on Bitcoin, all roads, if we can. It's like I feel like everyone at the, like in their heart of hearts is like a Bitcoiner that's building in the industry in some sort of way, and it's like if we can somehow build on top of that, why wouldn't we?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is super conservative for a reason. It's because they don't want to introduce changes that could compromise the security of Bitcoin. But with this one new innovation, right, we don't have to make changes to Bitcoin ever again, because the scope of what we want to do on Bitcoin remains sending Bitcoins back and forth, right? It's the sort of like backstop for these L2s. But at the same time, if we want new features for some application that we're building, we don't have to go to Bitcoin and say, hey, we need to add this feature to every single Bitcoin node. Instead, we just have this generic ZKP verifier, and you can write, I can be using Rust to write smart contracts for Bitcoin. You can be using EVM, right? The proof is all the same at the end, right? The structure of the proof. So by just adding this one cryptographic primitive to UTXO-based chains, suddenly we can let them be conservative, we can embrace their security model, and yet we can extend the security of Bitcoin to any application on the internet, right? So this is a first, right? And I also think there's this, normal people don't know what Ethereum is. Like people in our community know what Ethereum is. Traders know what Ethereum is. Normal people don't know what Ethereum is. If you tell people that you're building an application on Ethereum, they are going to think, what is this Jimmy Neutron?
Yeah, this crypto thing.
Right. Or maybe they've seen it and it's a weird name. They don't really know what it is. They know it's kind of something maybe Bitcoin adjacent. But if you tell people that we're building a social network on Bitcoin, if you tell that to a normal person, they'll probably have a rough understanding of what you're talking about.
Yeah, or at least they'll ask, well, how does that work? It seems interesting. Like it's Bitcoin, yeah, I've heard of that. I've got a little bit of Bitcoin,
And even if they don't have Bitcoin, like my grandma has heard of Bitcoin, right? She's never heard of Ethereum, right? Ethereum to her is something that scrolls past on the ticker of MSNBC that she doesn't know what it is, right? Maybe she thinks it's a stock. But like with Bitcoin, I think there is this sort of word of mouth. If anything is going to get to mass adoption, it has to be Bitcoin. And we've had these debates before, though, by the way, where people wanted to increase the block size of Bitcoin so that Bitcoin could scale more, so we could onboard more people. And the result was that it was rejected, right? Because we wanted to make it still super easy to run a Bitcoin node. Because the more transactions, going back to the original blockchain model, the reason why we don't want big blocks is because the bigger the block size means the more transactions you can fit in a block, and the more transactions every single Bitcoin node around the world has to run every 10 minutes.
Yeah, slows it.
Right. So if there's 1,000 transactions in a block and I'm trying to run a Bitcoin node on a Raspberry Pi, my Raspberry Pi isn't going to be fast enough to keep up, right? By the time the next block comes in, I still haven't finished, maybe I'm on transaction 500, right? But with ZKPs, we don't have the trade-off anymore, right? Let's say I have 2 applications and we want to reduce the footprint of these applications. Before they were verifying 1 ZKP each on Bitcoin. I could just have a ZKP which verifies both of those ZKPs and then send that ZKP off to Bitcoin. And the size of the proof is the same as either one of those, right? So we've reduced our footprint by half without reducing our security. So it's this magical thing where these more antiquated, more conservative, but more secure chains can now leapfrog over the guys that are, constantly pushing weird features, dank sharding, all of this stuff. And all we have to do is add a new cryptographic primitive. And we don't have to change the limits of things. We don't have to have these weird political battles. And there's, again, generational changes are exciting because you get an upgrade without trade-offs. You get new stuff without someone being upset in the background, right? Which leads to adoption. People want to
would this require, so you're saying this would require an upgraded Bitcoin?
It doesn't. The one thing is that, so this is a little bit of a nitty-gritty kind of a topic, but essentially the curves that we can verify a proof over on Bitcoin as it sits today are not super well understood or secure. So we can verify zero knowledge proof, but you can think of it as like, if you're, for the programmers out there, you can think of it as SHA-3 versus RIPE-MD 160 kind of situation, right? The number of bits of security that we have is less, right? However, if we added a primitive to verify over something like a curve that's called BLS 38112 or BLS 12381 rather, which to verify a proof of that proving system on, my 4-year-old math book takes, again, 1 millisecond, no matter what the proof is or what it's proving, it's all the same. We could add that to Bitcoin and then allow Bitcoin to, scale to millions of users with full Bitcoin security. Like the difficulty of forging a Bitcoin block or generating a huge number of sequential Bitcoin blocks at a given difficulty would be vastly easier than generating a false proof. So we know how to do this now. We're going to start by verifying proofs over a curve that maybe the NSA could break in 20 years, right? This is one way to go, right? And you have to sort of architect it so that in any given UTXO, or we sort of split the application into these different reservoirs, and in any given one of those, the amount of money secured by the proof needs to be significantly less than the cost of generating a fraudulent, zero knowledge proof, right?
It's kind of the same way Bitcoin is developed, right? Like the cost of breaking is much higher than the cost of just joining.
Exactly. So this is the game we have to play until we get dedicated primitives for this. However, over on Dogecoin, where we're going to be launching our testnet, actually today, we're going to be releasing a proposal to add op checkgraph 16 verify, a zero knowledge proof verifier opcode to Dogecoin. Just to give you guys some context, you may have heard of SegWit maybe, which is like an upgrade to Bitcoin a long time ago, right? We've got Taproot relatively more recently, which enabled things like ordinals. Well, Dogecoin doesn't have any of that. It was a fork of a fork of a fork of Bitcoin a long time ago, right? It's actually a fork of something called Lucky Coin that no one's ever heard of, right? And it's an older code base. And to upgrade it to add all these Bitcoin features would be very difficult. And I have a lot of respect for the Dogecoin developers because they're few in number, but they maintain a massive chain, and there have not been security exploits in Dogecoin because of them. There's 2 or 3 guys that are maintaining this $30 billion.
Wild.
And they're not getting paid. They do it out of the kindness of their heart. So much respect, especially to Patrick Lauder, who's a legend, right? This guy is maintaining Dogecoin through the thick and thin, right? Before Dogecoin was a really big thing. Yeah, by adding this one instruction, Dogecoin can not only leapfrog Bitcoin in terms of functionality, but it also becomes competitive with Ethereum, right? The really cool thing is Dogecoin has an even smaller block size than Bitcoin and tons of restrictions, right? The maximum script size is 520 bytes, right? But you can still, if you add an opcode, you can still make ZKPs work. And in addition to our proposal, we're releasing a fork of Dogecoin that has this enabled, where the only thing we've done is added this new instruction. Nothing else changes. And in addition, we built a rollup using this opcode, a full rollup with RPC servers, wallets, the works, that can do about 1,000 TPS, right? It's called City Rollup or Shitty Rollup for a reason, right? It's not supposed to be the end game of rollups. But City Rollup, you know, it's fully trustless, secure, and can do, again, 1K TPS, which is something like 40 times the current TPS of Dogecoin. And that's with one rollup. So yeah, like also Dogecoin community is super, super cool. We've talked to Via BTC, Ant Pool, F2 Pool, and all of them have been super supportive of, you know, adding this to Dogecoin, because we want, you know, they just want more on-chain transactions. And like with the UTXO chains, to be perfectly honest, you've mentioned there's Ethereum L2s, there's the optimistic rollups, there's all these different Ethereum L2s that are all competing with Ethereum for transactions, right? So like, what is the result of this? The good dApps go on Ethereum, the high value ones that can justify the transaction cost. And what do you see on the L2s, right? The shit, right? The stuff where the transaction cost matters, right? So people are willing to sacrifice convenience for transaction value, which means it's the low value transaction stuff. Now, there's great applications on L2, and you know, we're kind of an L2, so I don't want to hate too much, right? It would be bad for me, of course. But to be fair, like, would you rather have, if the transaction fee was the same, would you rather transact on Ethereum or on an Ethereum L2?
Yeah, and also would I maybe want to transact on maybe Dogecoin? Like, that's pretty interesting, actually. Like, what you're doing there is super interesting to think, like, you could be unlocking liquidity on the 10th largest cryptocurrency in the world.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is, instead of competing with Dogecoin, like Ethereum L2s compete with Ethereum, we're just enabling new types of applications to be built on Dogecoin, right? It's not like, oh, Dogecoins like dApps are going to move to L2s. There are no Dogecoin dApps.
Right.
You can build meme coin dexes on Dogecoin.
Unbelievable. And it's and if you say like, hey, if your grandmother's maybe heard of like a second cryptocurrency, it might be Dogecoin.
The one that Elon Musk likes. Right?
Yeah. Super interesting. I mean, and it's smart by you to kind of go towards a chain. Obviously, it's a massive chain. Everyone knows about it. And it's kind of got a couple of people that have influence and not the same type of, you know, there's no ETF. There's no, you know, maybe there will be an ETF now if all this stuff gets built on top of it. But, you know, you have a shot here at making a change to something that hasn't had a change in a long time and maybe reinvigorating that chain.
And we want to show the miners, specifically the people that mine Dogecoin, who are also the people that mine Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, yeah.
It's
like a test net. It's a test net for Bitcoin for you guys.
In fact, QED's official test net is going to be launching on Dogecoin mainnet, hopefully, as long as we can get this dip passed. But yeah, and like, we know the gravity of the situation. Like, that's why we literally built a roll up from scratch, like a whole protocol just for this Dogecoin opcode proposal, because, you know, even though it takes a lot of time to build these kinds of things, right? It's kind of a big gamble. At the same time, you know, what are they? I thought it was number 8.
It might have been. I was looking at it today.
It's number 8. It's number 8.
So top 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So
8th largest. I mean, what's the market cap right now? 30 something.
The market cap is 24 billion.
Yeah,
but
that's a ton of T-bill to unlock. I mean,
like, just
and like you said,
like that's more than Tron, Polkadot, Avalanche, Near, Polygon, Internet Computer.
Yeah,
I don't want to throw too much shade. Oh, I should watch myself.
Yeah, you're gonna now go down for that. No, I mean,
Internet Computer. Have you ever used Internet Computer?
I've not. I've looked at it actually.
Internet Computer.
I always say this a lot to people, is like, you know, if you can't tell me your favorite wallet on that chain, like, it's irrelevant.
I thought it was Insane Clown Posse, right? You know, the first time I saw it, it was like suddenly.
I did look into it. There's more there. There is more there, but again, it's confusing to people, right? And like what you're
Or are they
doing.
super juggalos? Is I guess what I was confused about. But yeah, like again, the problem with the L1s and the reason why I think L2s are big now is that like rather than solving a problem, they were trying to build new island ecosystems that don't have community. So you end up with these ghost towns, right? Like the Posse. However, like with Dogecoin, we have a great community. We just don't have tools to build dApps. So that's why we think it's exciting, because at the end of the day, all this does come down to like community building and making something that people want to use. So yeah, anyways, not
and
to,
and
not
and to have fun with, right? And I think that's where like meme tokens do come in a way. Like the reason that meme tokens went off this first quarter of this year was, people want to have fun, and it was just all of us insiders and gamers playing at the beginning when Bitcoin was the only thing that was moving. I mean, there was no money moving from like the Bitcoin ETF in your Fidelity account like directly, to XYZ meme coin, right? So that was all just money that was just like slushing around. But in a way, it's like, oh, it's pretty interesting if I can own maybe 10 Dogecoin and be a part of the community that cost me a couple of dollars versus like I can't, you're not going to afford a Bored Ape and be a part of that community. And so I think that's where it's like these meme coins, like there are going to be things that are created out of that. And I mean, think about all the social clubs that are out there. I know people think traditionally it's like golf clubs and all this stuff, but it's like there's a lot of social clubs, and like the entire utility of that is just to like hang out with people. That's it. That's the utility.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially now, like I feel like with social media, we kind of are always seeing these very reprehensible viewpoints all the time. So it's nice to be able to agree sort of almost blindly with someone else or a large community of people that something go up, right? So yeah, I mean, meme coins, I also kind of feel like it's sort of fun because it's like power, like the people are showing who is in charge. Like who decides what this is worth? Well, there's a lot of like weird stuff going on in the background that we don't really know about it, but I'm sure it is there. Like market manipulation and people deciding that this technology is worth $1 billion and stuff. And, other people just like a dog with a hat, right? So it's kind of like, I think, I don't know if I can curse on, it's kind of like a fuck you to the sort of like hyper technical zero use case kind of projects that, attempt to sell to retail, but that just people aren't really buying.
So yeah, I don't know why. No, I agree with you, and I don't know why people would get surprised that if you read the Bitcoin white paper in January 3rd, 2009, banks on the brink, like
this is our Genesis culture, right?
Yeah, like that is what comes out of that. Like everyone's like it's a rebellious kind of nature that's out there. So tell me a little bit. I mean, we're about halfway through here, a little bit more. I'd love to learn just a little bit more about your guys' plan. I mean, like you said, testnet, trying to kind of get things rolling. It seems like you're out kind of early talking about stuff as things are just kind of getting going. What are you trying to do right now? I saw you guys raise like a little bit of money. Like, are you hiring developers? Are you, is that why you're out here talking to everyone? Like, what are you working on like right now, like this week?
Yeah. So I'd say 30% of the time is hiring. We're hiring developers, PMs, designers, marketing people. Yeah. We just finished up a fundraise that we'll be announcing very soon. But
congrats.
Like, appreciate it. But the real thing that we're excited about is all of this Doge stuff that we've built. We're going to be releasing like later today. So like think of a trustless Dogecoin rollup that just takes Dogecoin's existing scalability and multiplies it by 40, right? So like this is for us very exciting. But in terms of like sort of down this go-to-market path, there has been a lot of Bitcoin L2s, as you're probably aware. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these L2s have gone down the path of let's ship a multi-sig and we'll do the decentralization later. And we're not doing that. So we want to launch QED. Like we have the core protocol done, but we want to make sure that we launch it in a way such that, one, on Bitcoin, the only way for anyone to ever touch your Bitcoins on L2 is if they break Bitcoin's own proof of work, right? This is what Bitcoin security means, right? The only way to break the L2 is if you break Bitcoin itself, right? There's none of that really applies to these multi-sig L2s, right? Because if they just decide to not let you withdraw your money, they can just keep your Bitcoins. And in fact, that's what Merlin did, right? So are you familiar with the Merlin folks? So they launched with a multi-billion-dollar valuation on OKEX. Big project, lots of waves. It was a multi-sig. And they, maybe I shouldn't say this. They acquired TVL, which is total value locked, which is just a statistic that people use, which is correlated with, how much are people using your chain. On the surface, it looks good, but they're sort of artificially juicing up this machine, right? And they're doing all these, high interest, sort of Ponzi scheme kind of things to get people to deposit in, because they thought that if they increase their TVL, their token price will go up, and then maybe they're going to try to sell.
They dump on retail, yeah.
Right. However, at some point a few weeks ago, people started to kind of get a little wise to the situation and started to withdraw. And then people found out that suddenly they have to wait to withdraw. And the waiting period started to extend. And what happened to the token price, of course? Right? Red candle. So, I'm not trying to give anyone financial advice, but for us, we're not focused on launching as soon as possible, in terms of months. We want to launch within the next year. So of course, go-to-market's very important to us. And if we just sit around building the whole time and never release anything, we're not contributing anything to society, right? And this is just a waste of time. But at the same time, we don't want to launch something for the purpose of trying to make quick money that violates the principles that we're in crypto for. If you're a crypto project and your message to people is, send me your money, just trust me, bro, my multi-sig is super secure. You're not only taking liquidity from Bitcoin, but you're also sort of you're offering a step back to Web 1, right? And for a lot of these chains, would you rather trust Bank of America or the Merlin founders, right? If it's a multi-sig, right? Because Bank of America is kind of like a multi-sig. You've got, if they want to take your money or freeze your money, you've got to have this guy get an approval. You've got to get that guy get an approval, right? There's a process to it. They can't just take your money away from you, right? They could if this guy signs off and this guy signs off and that guy signs off. But
yeah, but there's a legal system too. There's legal system that you can go through. So it's yeah.
So with these multi-sig chains, people like to talk the story of crypto. They tell the normal users lies, and they tell them this decentralized story where it's just as centralized as PayPal would be to send your money to, as we saw with Merlin. How are they able to suddenly make it so you can't take your money out, right?
Yeah.
We didn't know.
There's been other instances of that where there was I think there was I don't know, it was a Binance hack or BNB, and suddenly BNB, something happened and it was pretty fast, but it was oh, this is fixed.
Oh, well, I'm not I don't have big enough balls to criticize Binance. But yeah, that's where I draw the line. No, but okay, to be fair though, I don't think Binance has ever defrauded any of their users. This is the one thing that I think is very special about Binance is all the other big exchanges back in the day were kind of focused on how can we maximize our earnings per user. And I think Binance tried to maximize their earnings per project, right? So the people that Binance made the money off of was, trading fees and, I shouldn't say the word, listing fees, right?
Yeah, which I think, but I think people, right? People knowingly exchange that, for it's the same thing as marketing, right? It's hey, if you go fishing in the biggest, pond, there's going to be more fish, and so that's what.
It's the same reason why I have an HSBC account, but I've never deposited any Bitcoin into Merlin chain, right? I trust HSBC not to take my money away. But, you know, do I trust B Squared network? I don't know, not as much as I trust HSBC. But do I trust Bitcoin more than HSBC? The wonderful thing is you don't have to trust it, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing with zero knowledge proofs, right? I don't know. Kim Jong-un could make a zero knowledge proof. And as long as I can verify it on my computer, I know he ran the computation successfully, right? It doesn't matter. So I do think that there is, for us, we're focused on just ensuring currently, like the biggest thing that we're working on is just making sure that wherever we deploy QED, that it is at least as secure as the L1 that we're deploying to, so that users' funds will be protected and that we're doing generational shifts where there's no trade-offs. We're not decreasing security or decreasing scalability or decreasing anything, but we're adding new functionality to the protocol, because that's like value add. Otherwise, you could just debate whether, you know, I would argue that with these optimistic rollups, their drop in security does not justify the scalability increase. Like, how much TPS is Arbitrum doing, right? 20, right? Yeah. This is like a small fraction of Ethereum. Is it really helping? Is it worth sacrificing the reason why we came into crypto to use these chains?
Well, it comes down to what you said before of, and like, you know, we coined this phrase in early days with, you know, without a community, there is no crypto, right? It's all about the community and the builders. And I think people have this idea that, oh, we're going to go and say this is going to be higher TPS. And so we're going to have all these dApps building because it's going to be better. And then suddenly the people don't show up, but then they're still out there with that value proposition. And now you're stuck.
Here's the pernicious thing. Here's the scary thing and the dangerous thing. These platforms lie to their communities. They tell them that they have Bitcoin security. They muddle the concepts of Bitcoin being secure and them being super secure, right? For a very long time, I think even now, these optimistic rollups, and I quote, I believe it was Arbitrum that first had this, and then also we saw it in Optimism. They said that, one, they inherit Ethereum security, and two, they said that even though they haven't deployed fraud proofs, which, you know, for an optimistic rollup, or we call them fraudiums, right? Validiums have validity proofs. Optimistic rollups have fraud proofs, so they're fraudiums, right? They said that they inherit Ethereum security, and that even though they haven't deployed the feature of, you know, making an optimistic rollup or having fraud proofs, because they have a multi-sig, it's just as secure as having fraud proofs anyways. So they're equating their multi-sig with Ethereum security. Now, we all know that you could break an optimistic rollup that's using a multi-sig without breaking Ethereum, right? So Ethereum security can be just fine, and all of the money from the optimistic rollup can be stolen. How? I get this multi-sig key, I get this guy with a multi-sig key, and they're like, okay, we're going to split up the money, we're going to run it through Tornado Cash, and then we're going to, you know, get the fuck out of town, right? You could do that without breaking Ethereum security. So there is this, it's deception, right? They're lying to their users. And I'm concerned about that, because even though there's this massive public support for crypto and it's growing, if these scams and these lies come to users, and the user's experience is that they claim it's decentralized, they claim that I have full ownership of my assets, and then they stole it and I lost my assets, that person is lost forever. That person's never going to trust crypto again.
Yeah, I mean, we are still building out of the FTX hole, right?
But at least FTX didn't claim to be decentralized, right? I think there's something different there, where like, it's a very different proposition to say that a centralized exchange that you know was centralized, in that these people have had people whispering in their ears about self-custody and DEXs for their entire life, right? But they like the convenient experience of a centralized exchange. So while I do agree there's a lot of trust lost there for crypto as a concept, I do think that maybe, you know, people tend to try to rationalize, and even if they do that, in the back of their mind, they probably are thinking like, oh, fuck, I should have used a DEX, right? You know, how many people were thinking, oh, fuck, I should have bought a ledger instead of storing my Bitcoin on FTX, right?
True. Although I think with Terra, with UST and Terra, That was another one though. That was like everyone that was in a decentralized way was holding their UST. They were, had that awesome Terra wallet that everyone loved and making their 15% on a stable coin, which that should have been a red flag. But then, they realized like, oh, the tentacles of this are traded in a centralized manner, and 96% of Terra is of UST even was traded on Binance and everything else. It was like, sure, it was a decentralized token that was like launched out there, but it was on centralized exchanges, traded it with market makers.
And the key thing with Terra is that it didn't fail because Terra's blockchain was hacked. Correct. It failed because the code was bad, right? Because it was a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah,
now, this sort of well, it is, right? Let's not. Where does the 15% come from?
You're the yield.
Do they have a BitConnect trading bot that's making all the money? Right?
Great
yield.
Where
does the yield come from? Right? Well, for a lot of tokens, it comes from selling a governance token of dubious value. So this is a more sustainable kind of Ponzi scheme. But moving into the reason why scalability matters is right now, the only applications that make sense on blockchain to decentralize, because of the very few number of transactions we can process per block, which isn't very many. Like you can imagine with Ethereum, people talk about TPS. What does TPS mean? It means in every second, how many people can be using Ethereum at once, right?
Yeah, concurrent users.
Yeah. So if only, Ethereum TPS maybe 20, if only 20 people can be using the blockchain at once, and the whole world is trying to use it at the same time, we're not going to be able to build like an MMORPG where people are clicking away, right? There would be a huge queue of transactions, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of applications can be built on Ethereum? Well, applications where the business model of running the application doesn't require a large number of users to be profitable, right? Like Facebook only makes money because they have millions of users or billions of users, right? Mm-hmm. If Facebook only had 100,000 users, it would lose money. It would be a loss-making company, right? With the whole web business model, it's just that we have it's very expensive to build like an app, right? Or relatively so. And the cost of adding a new user, so every time a new user registers, the cost is relatively low, right?
Yeah,
so as long as you have enough users, it can be profitable. But with Web3, if we can only do 20 people online at the same time, you can't build a Facebook on Web3. You won't ever be able to have enough users to be profitable. So what kind of applications can be profitable with only 20 people using it at once?
Yeah, and I think it's like, I don't know if you're,
a Ponzi scheme and make a ton of money, right? That it's the truth. Now, I think there's one other application, which is DEXs. DEXs are a valid application that works with low numbers of users, right? Because it's a high value transaction. And then of course, the original use case of blockchain, which is just as a store of value, right? As digital gold or digital money. So we have these three use cases. Now, the only way we're going to crowd out the bad guys is if we replace them with other applications. But we can't find these other applications. No one's going to build a fun game that only 10 people can play at once. They'll never recoup their capital. And the game would be horrible, right? You could click, maybe I'm running it through a valley or a village or something, right? If I have to wait 10 minutes every time I move forward, no one's going to play that game, right? But with ZKPs, suddenly the difficulty of running a node, so that problem of having the transaction congestion goes away. I can have 1 million ZKPs, one for each action, and then have one ZKP which verifies some of them and split up the work, and we build this tree of ZKPs until we have one single zero-knowledge proof that you can verify on your phone in a millisecond, that any node can verify in a millisecond, which contains all 1 million of those transactions. So you don't have to compete for scarce block space, and we can build applications that matter and that are useful. And I think that attention shift, because these scam projects, they thrive on attention, that attention shift will crowd them out. And I think, it's a great point though. People that got burned by a big scam are probably not going to be coming back to crypto. Although there are some,
it might take time. I think
that learn their lesson and stay.
I think the underlying, I think once we get to a point where the average consumer doesn't understand, like we were saying, the same thing with the computer, doesn't really know that they're interacting, right? Like, I don't know if like the app that I'm about to tap on is on GCP or AWS, right? I don't know. I don't care, right? I'm just trying to see like a funny cat video, right? And that's entertainment for me. Or I'm trying to watch, Dune again, right? Like I'm just trying to get those things to my phone and trying to get entertained in a certain way. I think what you're saying is, over the course of the last 20 years where the internet's been built, it's been, on top of your data being taken from you. You're not your own API, right? You can't turn it off when you want to turn it off and stop giving your data. You're probably fine giving your data out if you're getting, value back, right? Using an app or using a DEX or whatever you might be using, but you want at least the autonomy to turn that off at some point. And that's just not the way that the internet's built.
So I think data is one component. I'm not a big fan of the whole Windows taking screenshots randomly now, I guess with the new AI stuff. I'm a privacy guy. I love ZKPs. But what I think is more important to people, because people don't really care about privacy yet. Maybe they will in the future, but they don't currently, right? It's like kind of an issue. Mostly government people worry about. I think what is more worrying is like, and all props to Elon Musk for building a platform that is the most free speech friendly. But one thing that they did is there was like someone had the Twitter handle @music for years.
Yes.
And they just took it from him.
Yeah, they took it.
And then they changed his handle. Like
it's like when Elon does stuff like that too, you're like, if you're an Elon fan, you're like, fuck, I love the spaceship, I love the Tesla, like all this is great. And it's like, dude, don't take the music handle.
Like this goes along with the philosophy of your stands, right? You shouldn't do this. It's a bad move. Yeah. But I think generally, especially like what percentage of your life do you spend on a computer? I'm sure you're much healthier than I am. I'm at like 9 or 10 hours a day.
No, I'm up there. I mean, I have to be. I mean, I'm on all day working. I'm the CEO of a company. Like I'm on social media constantly posting. I mean, we're a social media company. Way too much time. I'm aware of it. And it's like, but it's like, that's where the world's operating, right? Like if you work from your home and you want to interact with people and do shows like this and, be out in the world. It's like, you have to find a balance. But I mean, even if you're about to go have lunch with someone, you're on your phone the whole way there.
And I guess the question to ask is like, if Elon Musk wanted, could he take away your entire social media business, or a cabal of him, Mark Zuckerberg and
100%.
Could they just end it without any legal recourse because of terms of use violations, right?
Yeah.
They could. Well, doesn't that upset you?
Right? Yes, vigorously. I mean, I think like I'm super bullish on some of the decentralized social media stuff that I'm seeing, for Farcaster, Warpcast. But again, I'd love to see that built on Bitcoin. I would love that truth machine to be possible. And like, I think that's probably the best UX I've seen, right? Onboarding and getting someone used to that. But I don't know how much of the compute and the processes is on cloud versus, what, like, is it just your account that's securing the data, and where is that data actually stored? Well, it's not on my machine.
Right. Like, I think the data will come, but the problem with decentralized data storage is we don't have a ZKP silver bullet for data storage yet, which means that when you want to store data in a decentralized way, it involves making lots of copies of that data and storing it many, many times. Right. And the problem is that this is never going to be competitive with just storing the data once. Right. It's going to necessarily be more expensive. And the horrible thing is that the more you want the data to be available, the more secure your data is. You can think of it from that perspective, or the more available, to be perfectly accurate, the more expensive it is. Right. Because the way to get your data to be more available is to have more people store copies of it. And for each of those people, you got to pay them. So it increases linearly. But imagine if we had Twitter and the data is still stored in a centralized database, but the ownership of the usernames is not something that they can just, willy-nilly fiddle around with. Any changes to that data, which they store, needs to be accompanied by a zero-knowledge proof that proves that they're not modifying a user's username who didn't ask for it themselves. So and we can build this kind of stuff with ZKP. It's starting to happen. You see these sort of general purpose ZKVMs like SP1 and RISC-0, which is really cool, where it's basically just like a computer where you can run any program through it and magically get a ZKP. But like, I guess I'm also very curious on the UX side. You mentioned it. Like, the one thing is the wallet, right? People use password managers, but maybe not that many people use password managers even. Like, where do you see, like, what is the solution for fixing this?
For password managers or the wallet?
No, just like having a Web3 UX that's transparent to users, which doesn't involve the platform having custody of the user's key. So you can't use passwords. That's the thing, right?
Yeah, I like, even like the connect your wallet. You know, it's like all of my why. You know, it's basically like saying like my bank account is also the thing that connects me to Facebook or Instagram, right? That just seems wild to me. That like the mechanism, the wallet that is storing potentially someone's net worth, I have to connect that to like the meme coin page to interact with my friends. It's like, that just seems wild to me. So
no, but that's not what a wallet is, right? A wallet doesn't store anything. A wallet is just
the private key, I'm saying, but like you're signing it, you maybe signing a transaction to get to be a part of it. But it just, people have lost that, a little bit of that trust around like having to connect your wallet to a bunch of things. So I think that
solution is something that Bitcoin heavily promotes, which is using different keys for different things.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I don't use my bank password on my, I don't know, like Neopets account.
That's my exact point. Yeah.
So maybe we shouldn't be using one key for all of these things. But like, I am encouraged as society moves more passwordless that this won't be an issue in the future. Yeah, maybe it'll be like an opt-in kind of thing for the first ones, where it's like, if you want to use your wallet, or you can use a self-custody wallet to work. But
I have a feeling that it might, like this whole thing around like mnemonic and private key, it might not be so much that we solve the UX around some of this, versus I think that maybe the population just needs to age out in a way. Like, I think that as the population, it sucks, but it's like, as the population grows, it's like these young kids playing these different games, they have their wallets, they know what these private keys are. Like, that becomes the norm. Like, single sign-on wasn't a norm when I started like on the internet, and now it is. And I feel like there's just a lot of things that are more normal now, just because like people have aged out. And it's
but I don't even know if it's an aging thing. I think it's more like with single sign-on, for instance. The first time you use single sign-on, you would have preferred to have used something different, but you had to use it to use something that you wanted to use, right? And then
you might have been forced into it.
Understand the flow, and then you can do it again, and it's no biggie, right?
Yeah.
Like the first time you probably read all the different permissions that you're granting, probably maybe do that every time. Right?
You should hope, yeah.
But like, I think the problem we have is that we are this bubble, and everyone inside of the bubble, I'm not saying an economic bubble, but maybe I shouldn't use that word. That's a dangerous word. We are this sealed community, right? And everyone in the community has MetaMask installed in their browser, or most of us, except for some of the extreme folks. Most of us have like ledgers or Trezors, maybe not most, maybe 40% of us, right? And we all kind of know the deal, how dApps work, how waiting works, how like when MetaMask messes up the transaction, you kind of click it a few times, then try again. Like these kinds of things, we all kind of know how to do. But you say like the mnemonic and what a private key is, normal people don't understand what that is.
No,
so I think this is a much different proposition than asking someone to click sign in with Google, to be frank. Because they have no context for what this is. But if it's a sign in with Face ID, and what Face ID is actually doing is deriving a private key for you, the user doesn't have to know about it, right? Like, do you know how Face ID works? I don't know, right?
No, it's like look like this, and it just happens.
Here, it goes, right, and then I'm done. So I think we do need to get there. Like, we could age out of it, but I think the better path is we just need to try to get bigger companies to integrate these flows in and sort of figure out ways, like if we had browser support for, signing with Bitcoin wallets without an extension, that would be big. But
Yeah, I don't know why someone like Apple with just like their Apple Wallet, there's so much more that they can do there with like payments and everything. It's like I feel like someone needs to kind of like crack that.
I mean, if you had $100 billion, right? Like, and you knew that the government really didn't like this thing, would you add support for that thing?
I think I
Maybe they'll
would.
take your $100 billion away from you.
If I had $100 billion, that means that they have more cash than the government does on hand. So I don't know, but no, Apple's old. They're archaic.
Apple's $120 billion.
Yeah, they're archaic. They're not innovating anymore, in my opinion. There's a new iPad, and it was like, oh, it has a new chip. Sweet.
I mean, I'm a fan of the M series, but like, yeah, they're not building new, like there's no new iPhone or iPod, right?
Yeah.
Like the Vision Pro is for like socially awkward people that want to take notes in public, right? I don't know.
Awesome. All right, Carter, man, we did an hour. You're great. Maybe just tell people where they can find you and what you want them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at CMPQ. You can see it on the screen. On Twitter and X, at CF on GitHub, and follow QED Protocol at QED Protocol. And yeah, stay tuned. We've got a lot of really cool Doge updates coming in the next like 24 to 40 hours. So if you're a Doge fan, stay tuned. Big things coming for Doge.
Yeah, that was huge. That was. Did you break that news on here, or have you talked about that, or was that the first time you talked about it?
The
just
first
woke
time.
up. So, wow, that's amazing. Well, we'll have to post this out there. I know it's still morning over there, but thank you everyone out there for listening. Appreciate it. And Carter, man, we're gonna have to have you back. This was a lot of fun.